I didn't find out my husband was cheating in some dramatic, movie-worthy way. There was no lipstick on a collar, no late-night confession, no anonymous message blowing everything open. It was quieter than that, almost boring, which somehow made it worse. It started with a calendar notification. That's it. Something so stupid, so small, I almost ignored it. I was sitting at our kitchen island in our house in Westchester County, sipping cold coffee and half paying attention to emails, when his iPad lit up on the counter. Ethan had left it there that morning, rushing out the door like always, barely kissing me goodbye. The screen flashed with a reminder. Dinner, Lila, 7:30. Don't cancel again. I remember staring at it longer than I should have. My brain didn't go straight to cheating. It went to work, maybe a client, maybe someone from his firm. He was a partner now. Big deals, long hours, constant pressure. I told myself it was normal. But something about the don't cancel again part sat weird with me. Ethan canceled everything. On me, especially. Date nights we'd planned weeks in advance, canceled. Weekend trips, postponed. Even my birthday dinner last year had turned into takeout at 10 p.m. because something came up. But apparently, he wasn't canceling on Lila. I tried to shake it off. I really did. I told myself I was being paranoid, insecure. We'd been married for 11 years. We had a whole life built together. Our house, our routines, our shared history. People didn't just throw that away. At least that's what I thought. Still, I couldn't ignore the feeling creeping up my spine. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I checked his messages. I'm not proud of it. I used to be the kind of person who respected privacy, who believed trust meant not needing to look. But something had shifted lately. He was distant, not just busy, different. Like he was living in a version of our life that didn't include me anymore. His iPad didn't have a passcode. It never had. That detail still stings. I opened iMessage, my heart already pounding like I knew what I was about to find. Her name wasn't even hidden. Lila. No last name, just Lila. With a little heart next to it. My stomach dropped so hard I had to grab the edge of the counter. I don't even remember deciding to open the thread. My fingers just moved. And there it was. Weeks, months, maybe longer. Flirting that didn't even try to pretend it was innocent. Inside jokes I didn't understand. Photos? Nothing explicit, but intimate enough. A picture of her holding a wine glass, captioned, "Wish you were here." His reply, counting the hours. I felt like I was reading someone else's life. My husband, my Ethan, was a completely different person in those messages. Lighter, playful, engaged. He asked her about her day. He remembered details. He sent her things that reminded him of her, things he hadn't done for me in years. And then I saw it. I hate going home some nights. It feels like I'm already divorced. I read that line over and over again until the words stopped making sense. I didn't cry, not at first. I just sat there, completely still, like if I moved, the whole world would shatter. Because in that moment, something fundamental inside me broke. It wasn't just that he was cheating. It was that he had already left me emotionally. He was living a double life, and I had no idea. I kept scrolling, even though every part of me wanted to stop. There were hotel reservations, business trips that suddenly made a lot more sense, references to nights I thought he was working late, and then something that made everything colder. "She's starting to notice," he wrote. My chest tightened. "She always notices everything," Lila replied. "Not this. She trusts me too much." That's when I finally felt it. Not sadness, not even anger. Humiliation. I closed the iPad and just sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark screen. I looked normal, same as I always did, same woman who had been building a life with him for over a decade. Except apparently, I wasn't enough anymore. I don't know how long I sat there before I finally moved, but when I did, it wasn't to confront him. It was to get information, because something inside me had shifted, completely. I wasn't going to be the clueless wife anymore. I spent the rest of that day in a strange, hyper-focused state, like my brain had flipped into survival mode. I went through everything I could access. Emails, shared accounts, credit card statements. And what I found was worse than I expected. This wasn't new. It had been going on for at least a year, maybe longer. Dinner charges at restaurants we'd never been to together. Boutique hotel bookings in the city. Gift purchases, expensive ones, that I never received. He had built an entire relationship behind my back, and he was good at it. Careful, organized, strategic. Which made it even more terrifying, because it meant this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was a choice. Repeated, deliberate, calculated. By the time he got home that night, I had already decided something. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet,
because I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. He walked in around 8:15, loosening his tie, acting like everything was normal. "Hey," he said casually, dropping his keys on the counter. "Long day." I turned from the stove, forcing my face into something neutral. "Yeah, meetings all day. I'm exhausted." I studied him for a second. The man I had loved for over a decade. The man I thought I knew better than anyone. And suddenly, I didn't recognize him at all. "Dinner's almost ready," I said. He smiled. That same familiar smile. God, I hated how much it still affected me. "Smells good." We ate together like we always did. Talked about surface-level things. Work. News. Random nonsense. And the whole time I watched him. Every gesture. Every expression. Every word. Looking for cracks. But there weren't any. He was seamless. That was the scariest part. Later that night, he got a text. I saw his phone light up from across the room. Just a quick glance. But I caught the name. Lila. He picked it up immediately, turning slightly away from me as he typed a response. "Work?" I asked casually. "Yeah," he said without hesitation. I nodded, like I believed him. But inside, something hardened. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake next to him, listening to his breathing, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. And for the first time, the thought entered my mind clearly. I'm going to leave him. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was just certain. But I also knew something else. I wasn't going to walk away empty-handed. Ethan had built a massive career over the past decade. Investments, assets, connections. Our life wasn't just emotional, it was financial. And if he thought I was going to quietly disappear while he moved on with his mistress, he had no idea who he was dealing with. So I started preparing. Quietly, carefully. I reached out to a lawyer the next day. Someone discreet, highly recommended. The kind of person who handled complex divorces with precision. I didn't tell Ethan anything. I kept playing my role. The supportive wife, the oblivious partner. While behind the scenes, I was gathering everything I needed. Documents, records, evidence. I built a case. And the entire time, I kept thinking about her, Lila.
The woman who had taken my place, without me even realizing it. I didn't know what she looked like yet. Didn't know who she was, what she did, how she fit into Ethan's life. But I was going to find out. Because this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about both of them. And something told me this situation was bigger than it looked on the surface. I just didn't know how much bigger it was about to get. Not yet. The first time I saw her in person, I didn't recognize her right away, which somehow made it worse. It was a Thursday night, about 2 weeks after I found the messages. I had already started working with my lawyer, quietly, strategically, like I was building something in the shadows. We were pulling financial records, mapping out assets, preparing for what would eventually be a very controlled explosion. But I needed to see her, not just through texts and filtered photos. I needed to understand who she was in real life. What kind of woman knowingly built something with a married man? What kind of energy she had? What he saw in her that made him throw away everything we had. I knew where they were going to be that night. He had a client dinner in the city, Manhattan. Same place I saw in the calendar reminder. Same name, Leela. I didn't tell him I had plans. I just said I'd be home late too, something about meeting a friend. He didn't question it. That stung more than it should have. I drove into the city just after 6, my hands steady on the wheel even though my chest felt like it was being squeezed from the inside. The traffic was the usual mess, headlights stretching endlessly down the highway. People rushing to lives that probably made more sense than mine did in that moment. By the time I got to the restaurant, it was already getting dark. It was one of those upscale places, dim lighting, quiet music, expensive enough that people spoke a little softer without even realizing it. The kind of place we used to go to back when Ethan still made an effort. I didn't go in right away. I sat in my car across the street, watching the entrance. And then I saw him. Ethan stepped out of a black car, adjusting his jacket like he always did, checking his phone for a second before looking up. He looked good, confident, put together, like a man who had everything under control. A few seconds later, she walked up to him. That's when I felt it, that sharp, almost electric jolt in my chest. She wasn't what I expected. I don't know what I thought she'd look like, maybe younger, flashier, someone obviously trying too hard. But she wasn't any of those things. She looked effortless. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair pulled back loosely, simple black dress, nothing over the top, but it fit her perfectly. She had this calm, self-assured presence that you could feel even from across the street. And the way he looked at her,
that was the part that hit me the hardest. It wasn't just attraction. It wasn't even just affection. It was ease. Like being around her didn't cost him anything. Like he wasn't carrying the weight he always seemed to have when he was with me lately. He smiled at her, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen in years. She touched his arm lightly when she said something, and he leaned in just a little closer. Small gestures, subtle, but they told me everything I needed to know. I watched them walk inside together like they belonged in the same world. And suddenly, I felt like an outsider looking into my own marriage. I don't know how long I sat there before I finally got out of the car. I wasn't planning to confront them. That wasn't the point. I just wanted to be close enough to see, to confirm that this was real. Inside, the restaurant was warm and softly lit, the kind of place where everything feels slightly slowed down. Conversations blended together into a low hum. Glasses clinked. People laughed quietly. I spotted them almost immediately. They were seated near the back, tucked into a corner like they had something to protect, something private. I took a table across the room, angled just enough that I could see them without being obvious. And then I watched. For almost 2 hours. I watched the way she listened to him, fully present, like whatever he was saying actually mattered. I watched the way he leaned forward when he talked, engaged in a way I hadn't seen in so long it almost didn't feel real. They shared food, they laughed. At one point, she reached across the table and brushed something off his sleeve, her fingers lingering just a second too long. And he didn't pull away. No hesitation, no guilt, just comfort. That's what broke something inside me all over again, because I realized it wasn't just physical. This was emotional, deeply, intentionally emotional. By the time they got up to leave, I already knew something else. This wasn't casual for him. He was invested. I left before they did. I couldn't sit there any longer pretending I was just another stranger in the room. Back in my car, I finally let myself feel it. The anger, the betrayal, the humiliation. But underneath all of that, there was something colder. Clarity. Because seeing them together removed any last illusion I had been holding on to. There was nothing left to fix, nothing left to save. He had already moved on. So now, I would too. Just not in the way he expected. The next step was finding out who she really was, and that turned out to be easier than I thought. Her name wasn't just Leela, it was Leela Carter. And she wasn't just some random woman he met at a bar or through work. She was married. I remember staring at my laptop screen when I found that out, my fingers frozen over the keyboard. Married. That changed everything, because now this wasn't just an affair. It was 2 separate lives being quietly dismantled at the same time. I dug deeper. Her husband's name was Daniel Carter, finance, high level. The kind of man who operated in circles even more elite than Ethan's. They lived in the city. No kids from what I could tell. Private. Very private. There weren't a lot of pictures of them together online. No overly curated social media presence. Just enough to confirm that they existed as a couple. Which made it even more unsettling, because it meant they were both hiding something, living these parallel lives without anyone noticing. Or maybe someone had noticed. I started to wonder if her husband knew, if he was sitting somewhere, just like I had been, staring at something that didn't make sense, trying to piece together a reality that was quietly falling apart. That thought stayed with me longer than I expected, because for the first time, I didn't feel completely alone in this. There was someone else out there, connected to this mess in a way that mirrored my own, and I couldn't stop thinking about him, about what he would do if he knew, about whether he already did. A few days ago, something happened that made everything shift again. I got an email, from a sender I didn't recognize. No subject line, just my name. I almost ignored it, almost, but something told me not to. When I opened it, there was only one sentence. I think we need to talk about our spouses. My heart started pounding immediately. No signature, no explanation, but I knew exactly who it was. And for the first time since this all started, I felt something different. Not fear, not anger, something sharper, anticipation. Because whatever was coming next was going to change everything.
I didn't respond to the email right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to think clearly for once in this entire situation. Everything up to that point had been reactive, shock, anger, discovery. But this felt like a turning point, like stepping into something bigger than just my own broken marriage. I think we need to talk about our spouses. That sentence sat in my inbox like a loaded gun. I read it over and over again, analyzing every word, every possible meaning behind it. There was no threat in it, no accusation, just certainty. like whoever sent it already knew enough to skip the introductions. Daniel Carter. It had to be him. There was no one else it could be. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling of my office like it might give me some kind of answer. My house was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan was still at work, or at least that's what he told me. At that point, I didn't even question it anymore. His schedule had stopped being something I believed in. I finally opened the laptop again and typed a reply. Who is this? I hovered over the send button for a second, then clicked it before I could overthink it. The response came faster than I expected. Less than 5 minutes. Daniel Carter. My chest tightened, even though I already knew. There it was. Real. Confirmed. I didn't feel surprised. I felt validated, like 2 separate puzzle pieces had finally snapped together. I typed again. What do you know? There was a longer pause this time. 10 minutes. 15. I found myself pacing the kitchen, checking my phone every few seconds, like I was waiting for test results that would decide the rest of my life. When his reply finally came, it was longer. Enough to know this isn't new. Enough to know they think they're careful. They're not. I exhaled slowly, pressing my hand against the counter to steady myself. He knew. Not just suspected. Knew. And the way he said it, it sounded like he'd been sitting with it for a while. How long? I typed. Longer than you'd want to hear. That answer hit harder than I expected, because it meant everything I'd already found wasn't even the full picture. It was worse. Always worse. I stared at the screen, my thoughts racing. There were 100 things I wanted to ask, but one question kept pushing to the front. Why are you contacting me now? This time, his response took nearly half an hour. By the time it came through, I had already started imagining scenarios. Maybe he wanted revenge, maybe he wanted to expose them publicly, maybe he just needed someone who understood. But his answer wasn't what I expected. Because I think you're handling this smarter than I did. I blinked at the screen. What does that mean? I typed back. The reply came almost instantly this time. I confronted her. Of course he did. Something about that made my stomach drop. How did that go? I asked, even though I already had a feeling. There was a longer pause again, and when he finally answered, the tone had shifted. Shorter, tighter. It didn't. I leaned back in my chair again, my heart beating slower now, heavier. I could picture it without him needing to explain. The confrontation, the denial maybe, or the half-truths, the emotional chaos, the kind of explosion I had deliberately avoided. Then what do you want from me? I asked. The response came in a single line. To do this right. I read that sentence at least 5 times. It felt calculated, not emotional, not desperate, focused. And that made me take him more seriously than anything else he had said so far. I hesitated before replying again. What does right look like to you? This time there was no delay. Not tipping them off. Not giving them time to protect themselves. Not letting them rewrite the narrative. My grip tightened around my phone. He wasn't wrong. Every instinct I had since finding out had been telling me the same thing, even if I hadn't fully put it into words yet. Ethan was careful, strategic. If he sensed anything, he would start covering his tracks even more than he already had. And if Leela was anything like him, they would protect each other. I typed slowly this time. So, what are you suggesting? There was a pause, longer than before. And when his message came through, it was different. Not just text. An attachment. My chest tightened as I stared at the file name. I opened it. Financial records. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was detailed, painfully detailed. Transactions, transfers, accounts I didn't recognize. And then it clicked. These weren't just random expenses. These were shared, hidden, structured in a way that my stomach turned. I scrolled faster, my heart pounding louder with every line. Hotel payments, investment movements, large sums shifted through channels that didn't directly tie back to either of them at first glance. But they were connected, carefully, intentionally. This wasn't just an affair. This was something else entirely, something bigger. What is this? I typed, my hands suddenly unsteady. His reply came almost immediately. What they don't think we'll find. I felt a cold wave move through my entire body. How did you get this? I told you. I didn't handle this well at first. But I corrected that. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just emotional betrayal anymore. There was money involved, a lot of money, and not in a casual, careless way. This was planned, hidden, protected. Why are you showing me this? I asked. There was a longer pause this time, long enough that I started to feel something shift again, something deeper than just anger or shock. And when his response came through, everything changed. Because what they're doing affects both of us, and because you deserve to decide what happens next with all the information. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. This wasn't just about catching them anymore. This was about leverage, power, control. Things Ethan thought he had. Things he clearly didn't realize were already slipping out of his hands. I closed the file slowly,
my mind racing in a completely different direction now. Because for the first time since this started, I wasn't just reacting. I was thinking ahead, planning. "What's your endgame?" I asked. The reply came after a few minutes. "To make sure they don't walk away from this untouched." I let out a quiet breath, my eyes drifting toward the window. The sky outside had gone dark without me even noticing. And somewhere in the back of my mind, something settled into place. Because whatever this was, whatever he was offering, it aligned perfectly with what I had started to feel but hadn't fully admitted yet. I didn't just want to leave Ethan. I wanted him to feel it. Every part of it. The loss, the exposure, the consequences. And now I wasn't alone in that. I typed one final message. "Then we should meet." This time the response came immediately. "Tomorrow. I'll send you the location." I stared at the screen for a long moment after that. Because deep down, I knew something. Tomorrow wasn't just a meeting. It was the beginning of something much bigger than I had planned. Something that was about to change the trajectory of everything. And I had no idea just how far it was going to go. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute.
I lay in bed next to Ethan, staring at the ceiling while his breathing stayed slow and even beside me, like nothing in his world had shifted, like everything was still exactly the way he wanted it. But for me, everything had already changed. By the time morning came, I wasn't nervous anymore. I was focused. He left around 7:30, same as always. Same rushed goodbye, same distracted tone. He didn't even look at me long enough to notice that something inside me had completely recalibrated. I watched him pull out of the driveway through the front window, my arms folded tightly across my chest. Then I turned, grabbed my keys, and left 10 minutes later. Daniel had sent the location just before midnight, a private office building in Manhattan, Midtown, clean, corporate, the kind of place where people handled serious things behind closed doors. No coffee shop, no public setting. That told me everything I needed to know about the kind of man he was. When I got there, I sat in my car for a moment, looking up at the building. My reflection stared back at me from the rearview mirror. I looked composed, calm, but underneath that, there was something else entirely, something sharper. I stepped out, walked in, and gave my name at the front desk. The receptionist didn't even question it, just nodded and directed me upstairs. He was already there. Of course he was. Daniel Carter stood near the window when I walked into the room. Tall, composed, dressed like someone who was used to control. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Clean cut, precise in the way he carried himself. He turned when he heard the door close. And for a second, we just looked at each other. Two people who had never met, but were suddenly connected by something neither of us had chosen. "You came," he said. His voice was calm, measured. I said I would. There was a pause. Not awkward, just deliberate. He gestured toward the table. "Sit." I did. There was a folder already placed in front of my chair. I didn't touch it yet. Instead, I looked at him. "You've known for a while," I said. It wasn't a question. He nodded slightly. Long enough to stop reacting emotionally. That matched everything about him so far. "And you didn't confront her again?" "No." "Why?" His jaw tightened just slightly, the only crack in his composure so far. "Because the first time gave her exactly what she needed. Time to adjust." That lined up with what I had feared. "What changed?" I asked. He held my gaze for a moment before answering. "You." That caught me off guard. "What about me?" "I started looking into your husband more closely after I confirmed the affair. Patterns, behavior, financials." He paused. That's when I realized this wasn't just personal. My eyes flicked down to the folder on the table. "Open it," he said. This time, I did. Inside was everything. And I mean everything. More detailed than what he had sent me digitally. Account breakdowns, shell companies, asset movements that didn't align with what I knew about our finances, transfers that were clearly designed to stay hidden unless someone knew exactly where to look. I flipped through it slowly, my pulse steady but heavy. "How much?" I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. "Just over 100 million. I froze. For a second, I thought I misheard him. "What?" "Combined," he clarified. "Not just your husband. Both of them. It's layered, but it's connected." I stared at the documents, my mind trying to catch up. Ethan was successful, very successful. But this was beyond what he had ever told me. "What is this?" I asked, my voice lower now. "Insurance," Daniel said. I looked up at him. "For what?" "For leaving." The room went completely still. "They've been planning this," he continued. "Not just the relationship, an exit." I felt something drop deep in my chest. "A clean break," he added. "Separate assets, hidden reserves, enough to walk away without losing what they've built together." Together. That word hit differently now. This wasn't just an affair. This was a partnership. A betrayal on a level I hadn't even considered. I closed the folder slowly. "And you're sure about this?" "I don't deal in sure. I deal in verified." Of course he did. I let out a slow breath, leaning back slightly. And what exactly do you want to do with this? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked around the table and sat across from me. Then he said something that shifted everything. I want out. I studied him. That's it? No, he said calmly. I want out clean, and I want her to have nothing she wasn't entitled to before this started. That made sense. Cold, controlled, precise. And my husband? I asked. His eyes didn't waver. That depends on you. There it was, the line I had been waiting for. I looked down at the folder again, then back at him. And what are my options? He leaned back slightly, folding his hands. You can confront him, blow everything up, risk him locking everything down before you get what's legally yours. Not an option. Or, he continued, you can let me handle the structure. My eyes narrowed slightly. Meaning? Meaning, he said. We move first. A quiet tension filled the space between us. How? I asked. He slid a single document out of the folder and turned it toward me. By removing the leverage they think they have. I looked at it. Legal frameworks, asset control mechanisms, complex but clear in intent. And where do I come in? I asked. His gaze stayed locked on mine. You become the one holding the advantage. There was a long pause, because I understood exactly what he was saying. This wasn't just about divorce anymore. This was about control over everything Ethan thought he had secured. And why would you help me do that? I asked. That was the one question I needed answered before anything else. Daniel didn't hesitate. Because it benefits me. At least he was honest. How? Because if they lose access to what they built together, he said calmly, they lose the reason they built it. That landed exactly the way he intended. Hard, strategic, final. I sat there for a long moment, processing everything. The betrayal, the scale of it, the fact that Ethan hadn't just cheated. He had planned an entirely separate future. Without me. And now, for the first time since I found out, I wasn't just reacting to that reality. I was in a position to reshape it. I closed the folder. Then I looked him straight in the eye. What do you need from me? And that's when he said it. Clear, direct, unshaken. I need you to trust me. I let that sit in the air for a second. Then I shook my head slightly. I don't trust anyone right now. A faint, almost imperceptible shift in his expression. Good, he said. That makes this easier. I raised an eyebrow slightly. How? Because this isn't about trust, he replied. It's about alignment. I exhaled slowly. He wasn't wrong. Not about any of it. I stood up, the decision already forming before I even fully acknowledged it. All right, I said. His attention sharpened slightly. All right, he repeated. I met his gaze without hesitation. Let's take everything they think they have. For the first time since I walked in, something almost like approval flickered in his eyes. Not satisfaction, not excitement, just confirmation. Like he already knew I'd say yes. And in that moment, I realized something else.
This wasn't just the beginning of the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Because Ethan thought he was in control of everything. His life, his affair, his future. But he had no idea what was already in motion behind his back. And when it hit him, he wasn't just going to lose me. He was going to lose everything, including the one thing he never thought I'd take from him: power.